Now, Iowa and Donald Trump's thumping victory. Or was it? Let's bring in my next guest. I know he's one of your favorites, and he's definitely one of mine. Former congressman, former chief of staff to none other than Donald Trump, and, of course, senior advisor at Bondi Partners, Mick Mulvaney. Mick, welcome back. Happy New Year, and let's talk Iowa. First of all, Donald Trump had a huge majority on a freezing cold night, but still only about 40% of Republicans who did show up actually voted for him. Is this, as some on the left are saying, a weakness for Trump come the general election?
Hey, James, it's good to see you. Happy New Year. Happy 2024 election year. So, yes, a new year. We're coming right smack dab into the middle of the campaign. Trump did very well. He did. I think he pulled about 52% at the end of the day. That's a good number. He could have won with 40%. He could have won with 42%. But if he did, there'd be a lot of discussion about more people voting against him than voting for him. But he did extraordinarily well, I think. He's doing very well, by the way, in New Hampshire, South Carolina. He's above 50% in just about every poll I've seen in all of the early voting states, with the possible exception of New Hampshire. There was a chance here that Ron DeSantis might have stolen some of his thunder by doing better than expected. He did a little bit of that, passing Nikki Haley, but neither of them were close to Donald Trump. I think Trump won by 30 points over both Haley and DeSantis, and that's a thumping victory any way you look at it.
Yeah, no, that is pretty huge. And the question then becomes, where do Nikki Haley and Ron DeSantis go? I was pretty amazed to watch Nikki Haley get up. She came in third and said, hey, it's a two-person race. It's just me and Donald Trump. Is she now, because as I said at the start of the show, Nikki Haley is clearly the one that Donald Trump wants to take out. She's got a lot of big money behind her. Is that where the fight now is?
It is, for a variety of reasons. By the way, I watched the same speech. I watched it live, and all I could think to myself was someone wrote that for Nikki at the beginning of the day. They expected to finish second, and they didn't. And it's actually hurt Nikki a little bit. She's lost a little bit of momentum, but she's going now into New Hampshire. Here's what's interesting, James, about New Hampshire. It's one of the handful of states where pretty much anybody can vote in a primary. So Nikki's actually out there now catering to and appealing to unaligned, say, centrist independent voters, maybe even some Democrats, trying to get them to cross over to vote for her in this primary. That's why I think you're going to see a margin in New Hampshire that's different. Nikki Haley, for example, depending upon the polling that you're seeing, is someplace down by 4 to 14 points in New Hampshire, where she just lost Iowa by 30. The difference there is not really Nikki Haley or Donald Trump. The difference is who gets to vote in the primary. So when these non-Republicans get to vote in a Republican primary, it can change the outcome. She doesn't care. She wants to win the state. She's got a small chance of doing that. She wants to at least do a really, really strong second, because the next state down the pipe is South Carolina, her home state.
Yeah, so is what you're talking about now what we call in Australia strategic voting, where people aren't going to vote for their party that they want to win, but they want to send a message and create a bit of chaos for Donald Trump. Is that what's going to happen here next Tuesday?
That's exactly right. You're going to see Trump win probably in New Hampshire, but this will be his narrowest margin, I think, out of any state that I've seen.
Right. And then then we go forward. Donald Trump still remains presumptively the nominee. Is it too early to start talking about his options for running mate? I've heard talk about New York Congressman Elise Stefanik. I've been saying Vivek Ramaswamy might be up for it, although I think communications director would be great for him. There's even been talk of Tulsi Gabbard. What do you think? Where would you see him going? And is it just too early to make the call? Because ultimately it's just going to be up in his head at the moment.
Yeah, no, it's not too early. In fact, that discussion has started in earnest. I'm hearing rumors out of Mar-a-Lago about all those names that you just mentioned. There's a couple of folks you haven't mentioned. Kristi Noem, the governor of South Dakota, is very tight with Donald Trump, and she would be a very strong vice presidential candidate. The other name that I'm hearing a good deal about is Dr. Ben Carson. Carson was in the cabinet with us in the first Trump administration. He and the president are very close. They get along fairly well. And this is an interesting factor, James. What I'm hearing out of Mar-a-Lago is that the president is worried about putting someone on vice president and in a vice president who would immediately start running for president. Because keep in mind, he can't run again after he wins. He can only win twice. So if he wins, he's immediately a lame duck. And there's a concern in the Trump world about putting somebody like Stefanik in there, like Nikki Haley in there, who might be somebody who immediately starts running for president and thus maybe upstages the president a little bit. So there's that. Maybe they're looking for somebody who's a good vice presidential candidate, but who doesn't want to run for president, him or herself, after this is over. By the way, there's precedent for that in the recent past. It's one of the reasons that George W. Bush picked Dick Cheney.
Right, fascinating. So I think what we're looking at here is the first case of two lame ducks running against each other in American history, which is absolutely fascinating. Mick, we're going to have to leave it there, but we'll see you again next week or very soon here on the U.S. Report.